When you're watching The Incredible Hulk, it is the second movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I gotta say, I kind of enjoyed this one a lot more than I remember. I think there were a lot of moments in it that I really liked, particularly the part where obviously Hulk and Abomination fight each other. I thought was a really that's what it was kind of all building up to. I don't know. Outside, I think the action worked really well for what they were doing. I don't. I think in the grand scale of like the whole story of the Hulk or what he's been through in the Marvel kind of universe, it feels kind of like it feels like a bit of a throwaway because none of the ideas or the concepts that they use in this movie carry on to the next thing with obviously Mark Ruffalo and his version of the Hulk. So it kind of feels like it gets scrapped, but I do kind of like some of the ideas and the concepts that they had in here, which is like basically him just trying to live with this disease or with the Hulk, you know what I mean? How do you live with it, right? It's really hard because if his heart rate gets too high, he transforms. If he gets too angry, he transforms. If he gets injured, he transforms. It's like there's no escaping it, there's no avoiding it. It's just like how can I stay a calm, peaceful, how can I stay relaxed and keep my emotions, my body from transforming? How do I stay as me? And it's just him trying to figure out how do I survive? How do I live with this? And how do I not hurt people or become a threat to anyone? And I thought that was pretty interesting. And then obviously they introduced Thunderbolt Ross, Thaddeus Ross, I think is his name, and the thing he gets introduced in this movie, and he becomes very important, in these upcoming movies. So it just like he has like his role continues to have significance, and I think that's a cool thing. What else is there? I think Edward Norton was a good choice. I thought it was kind of a nice idea. But obviously, again, not, you know what I mean? Not saying anything bad, but it's just kind of like in the totality of this whole MCU thing, it feels like I'm really glad that Mark Ruffalo stuck around, if that makes sense. I think he was also another great choice for playing the Hulk. Um, I also feel like the character just changed, and I'm glad it changed. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if the version of the Incredible Hulk I got with Bruce Banner with Edward Norton could last, or like I don't know if it could really develop in the same way that Mark Ruffalo's has. Does that make sense? I just can't see Edward Norton's Bruce Banner and I guess maybe Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark interacting as well as Mark Ruffalo and Robert Downey Jr. You know, together. I don't know. Maybe that's just kind of like I already know it, so I can't see it. But like I already know Mark Ruffalo is in the Avengers and he plays alongside Robert Downey Jr. So maybe that's why I'm like, oh, I can't see myself. I can't see Edward Norton acting alongside everybody else. Does that make sense? Maybe, hopefully. But anyways, the movie itself, it definitely it definitely had some twists and turns that were like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously, they have to make the bad guy, or they have to make somebody bigger and stronger than somebody just as big and strong as the Hulk in order for them to have like this big fight in New York City. You know what I mean? So when it comes to that aspect of it, it feels kind of tacky, and it feels kind of like, oh yeah, of course, they have to make another version of Hulk, or, the Abomination in order to fight. You know what I mean? And it's kind of interesting because Abomination is still around. Like, even though Hulk kind of kills him, I guess, it doesn't really mean death. It means that it's just that, like, he comes back. I don't know. It's all kind of weird and different when you see like the full story. But as of right now, where it stays with me, this movie, it just kind of feels like a throwaway the beginnings of the Marvel movies. You know what I mean? It was their second attempt. It was definitely interesting, but it wasn't, in my opinion, I don't think it's like a standout. It's not anything I would recommend anybody watching. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like if you want to watch it, cool. If you don't want to watch it, fine. You know what I mean? It's just, it has no, whether it's in it or out of it, it has no difference to me. You know what I mean? Because they made another Hulk film with Eric Bana, I think, and that one has no kind of relevance to the Marvel movies. It was just a comic book movie that they made. It wasn't like connected in any way, shape, or form to what's it called? To the movies. It was just there. You know what I'm saying? It was one of those early things. Just like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man isn't a part of the Marvel thing. It's just a superhero movie they made. So same thing goes for that one. And that's how I kind of feel about this, The Incredible Hulk. It's like, it is a part of it, but it's not a part of it. You know what I mean? It doesn't affect the story as a whole, I guess. Maybe some characters kind of stick around, like Thunderbolt Ross. That actor stays around, and they kind of keep that concept of it, but not the whole idea of that movie. But outside of that, I thought that there were a lot of great moments. I definitely like the way the Hulk looks in this movie. Comparing that movie, The Incredible Hulk, to the one that we see in, like, let's say, The Avengers, is completely different. They're two very different versions of the same character. And for obvious reasons, I think that this version of The Incredible Hulk was a lot darker. It was a lot more tough, I guess, or what's the right word? It was just a lot more. It was a lot tonally darker. You know what I mean? It needed to be this huge. I mean, I guess it always is this huge transformation, or this huge, like, comparison between the two. You know what I mean? But when it comes to, I guess, the way this Incredible Hulk version looked, he seemed a lot more creepy, a lot more dark, a lot more shaded, and a darker version of green. Whereas, I guess, when they started working with Disney and working with, like, all of the advertisers and whatnot, like, they wanted to make him more of like a green, you know what I mean? More of like a regular lighter shade of green, and have his facial expressions really show his rage, and like his kind of, they kind of wanted to show the rage and a lot differently. Does that make sense? Maybe that doesn't make sense. What I'm trying to say here is The Incredible Hulk, this movie, was tonally, and it was just a lot darker, a lot different than what would go on to become the Hulk from Mark Ruffalo. So because it is such a huge shift, it is such a different, they're working with a different studio. I think they were able to take a lot more. They were able to make the Hulk in this movie a lot darker, a lot meaner looking, kind of like more of ruthless and crazy than, say, what would become of the Hulk in what would become the Hulk in the Avengers, because it is such a different version of that comic book character. You know what I mean? So because of that, I think there are some pros and cons to it. Obviously, I really wish that the Hulk was I don't know, because the Hulk is angry, but it's not the same. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it right. But all I'm trying to say is, for this movie, it was just a very experimental version of the character. They were just testing stuff out. You know what I mean? Obviously, within lines of the character, you know what I mean? They get it right, but they don't. I don't know. The plane flew, but it didn't land right. You know what I mean? There were some technical issues with the landing of it, and I think that's why they went a completely different direction when it came to reintroduce or to have him be part of a team. You know what I mean? That's why they went with maybe another actor or something, or maybe there was some behind the scenes stuff. Perhaps Edward Norton wasn't as interested in it anymore, or there were some issues with his version of it and whatnot. So they just decided, you know what, let's recast it. Let's try something new and go in a different direction. You know what I mean? Kind of take some of the best bits of it, like the actor who played Thunderbolt Ross, and have him be a part of the MCU. Take, like, obviously some of the, I think they play some footage during, like, the Avengers when they're, like, showing, like, their history or their past or, like, what's going on with them. But they don't really get into the whole thing about it. They just take the best bits of it. So the bit about the Hulk fighting the Abomination in New York City or wherever, that they can keep. That's an event that happened, but it doesn't have to be Edward Norton doing it. They can just, oh yeah, that was Mark Ruffalo's Hulk doing that. You know what I mean? They can kind of like swap it out for like story beats, but it doesn't have to be like one and the same, I do like the idea of like of him having companions, of him having like people who want to help him, or like he's working with people that are like other doctors who are trying to cure him of this thing. Like he had what was it, Mr. Blue? I forget the name of it. And he obviously has like Betty Ross, who's like Thunderbolt Ross's daughter and stuff. Like he has them trying to like help him out and control the Hulk. You know what I mean? They're all working together to try to, hey, how can we figure this out? How can we kind of contain this? How can we make me a normal man again? And that's the cool thing. That's the part I wish they were able to show more of, is like, it feels like after this movie, he doesn't really have any companions. I mean, obviously, as the story goes on, he has the Avengers. But what I'm trying to say is that, like, there's nobody trying to help him anymore. He's not trying to help himself in that way anymore. It's more so like he's living with it and he's just doing whatever with it. I don't know. It's a little bit weird what direction they can or can't go in when it comes to the Hulk. And then I also heard that they had like licensing issues, or like, I don't know. I don't think that they own the rights to the Hulk anymore. Maybe they sold it when they were going bankrupt or whatever. And they were having a hard time getting that that kind of licensing or that copyright back, the rights to the character back. And it was only just maybe very recently that they were able to, quote unquote, get the rights to the Hulk back. So now they can make like a solo movie if they so chose. I'm not saying they do, but if they wanted to. Do I think that any version or like any Hulk movie will be like any solo version of a Hulk movie? Do I think it will be good? Like, obviously the Incredible Hulk movie was, again, I just want to call it experimental. They were just testing the waters. They were just trying. You know what I mean? Like, they tried with Iron Man, and it was a hit. It was a big hit. They tried with the Incredible Hulk, and I guess it was a sort of a miss. They missed the mark with the Incredible Hulk. They didn't really stick the landing, as I said. It was a bit of a technical difficulty there. You know what I mean? But it did okay enough that they decided to, like, keep it as part of the superhero continuity, the superhero, the MCU. They decided to keep the Hulk as a part of the MCU, But anyways, I always thought that the interesting part about him was that there would always be something kind of pushing him to become smarter or something to become better. You know what I mean? Like, that's truly what it is, I think, is that, like, his character or what he's trying to do is become in control of himself enough that he can, like, not become the Hulk. I mean, obviously the dream is not to have the Hulk at all, but it's kind of to just never to go through all of your ranges of emotions and everything that's in your life and not transform or turn into something big, green, and scary. It's instead to stay as yourself, and it's a lifelong thing to master, and I've thought it would be kind of cool that was the cool thing about him, was that he was never fully in control of it. And no matter what he tries or what he does, whether it's medically or emotionally or mentally, he'll never be able to escape it. And it's just about, okay, I am going to transform, but now how can I still have kindness and compassion and still be, how can I be this big green monster and still be gentle and soft? You know what I'm saying? And I think they explored that throughout the stories, throughout like all the other movies that he appears in. But I don't know I honestly don't know if this movie was kind of like, if like the Incredible Hulk was supposed to serve as, oh, he has full control over it. Because by the end of the movie, you see his eyes kind of glow green, and it kind of insinuates that he's like this version of Bruce Banner that can access it. And maybe that is true. I'm recalling how they do it later on, but I guess there is sort of like a secret to it. There is sort of like a, well, that I can recall, is that he does have like some sort of, I know what I'm doing, or I know how to like become the Hulk, but now it's just like, how do I control that part of myself? Let me think. Outside of that, I thought the acting in this movie was pretty good. I thought, it really just felt like Bruce Banner trying to like, hey, let me just try to stay away from people, try to live a calm life, and let me just try to, do my own thing. And instead, it feels like the government is more like, no, we have to kill him. When you can't kill him. Like, that was kind of like the dumb thing about it, is that, like, the villains go seeking the problem. You know what I mean? Like, they intentionally go towards the problem, and then that makes it a big problem. Right? Like, you never go towards a problem, because that just makes a problem. When a problem arises, then you go and take action. But it felt like, obviously it felt more like they were just completely antagonizing him, trying to get this reaction out of him, trying to kill him when they know that it's not going to work that way. It just doesn't. And I do feel like it was kind of like, oh man, that wasn't the direction I think it should go. Obviously, the Hulk is a threat. Obviously he's a big, scary, rampaging monster. But at the same time, it shouldn't be like we have to go stop him and hunt him down. You know what I mean? It should be more like, oh, he might do something, so therefore we have to be ready for it. And because we're trying to get ready for it, we have to wait for for a situation to arise. So it should be more of like a monitoring situation. Like, they should have monitored him, and when something goes wrong with like one of his experiments, then they can all kind of like, okay, get ready. If he transforms, we can fight him. So it's like less of like a villain and more of like a watchful eye. And then obviously there would be like a bad guy mixed into there. You know what I mean? There would obviously be somebody who's like watching him, trying and failing multiple times over and over and over again, getting fed up with it. And then, I guess, doing something drastic or like crazy to fight him or whatever. Which is what kind of ends up happening in this movie. The guy transforms into the Abomination, he loses control, and then the Hulk fights, and they get into that big fight, and it just feels like this is what they wanted to do all along, and everything else was just kind of like, how can we make this happen? How can we make the Hulk fight another Hulk and have him be like this hero? You know what I mean? Even though they're both destroying the city, it's like, yay! You know what I mean? It's like a big celebration. It's like, oh my gosh, they're destroying the city, but he's fighting for us, and he stopped him. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel right. Realistically, how do you keep a character like the Hulk interesting without making it too repetitive, without making it seem too much like same old, same old? He does the same thing every single time. He tries to stops trying to transform, and then stopping trying to transform, he ends up transforming, he turns into the Hulk, he destroys some stuff, and then he feels bad about it. Like, how do you keep it from being like that? You know what I mean? And I think this movie kind of showed it, is that like, if he lives like a peaceful life, he's kind of okay. Not perfect, but he's all right. You know what I mean? He doesn't get to enjoy all of life's great pleasures. You know what I mean? All of the simplicities of life. But he does kind of like live a normal life. But how do you make that character interesting? And that kind of felt like what this movie was. Like, by himself, he's a little bit boring, and it's kind of like repetition. Like, he gets chased by the government, the military. They try to kill him because he's a threat as the Hulk. And then it's also like, How do we stop him from turning into the Hulk? We kill him. You can't kill him because he turns into the Hulk when he does, and he'll just kill everybody else. So it's like all of this destruction, and it happens again and again and again. And then they get like their own Hulk, who they think is going to be like a good guy. It turns out it's a bad guy, and then the Hulk comes in last minute, saves everyone, and that's how he becomes like this hero. And it just, I don't know. I feel like that's why he works better, and kind of in theory or as a concept, he works better with like other people around him, other superheroes or other like-minded individuals to like fight alongside with, because by himself, it's like, how do you realistically expect anybody like on Earth per se to see him as a hero when all he does is just destroy stuff, you know what I mean? But then automatically you make it an alien invasion to Earth, and he just starts killing aliens, and he's like destroying buildings and whatnot, and it's like, hey, you can't be mad at the Hulk. They invaded the Earth, you know what I mean? It's like, that's how you can kind of see it, as like, oh, he's a good use of like destruction and violence when it's like a part of a team, when it works to our benefit. But when it just happens, like in this movie, like when it just happens when all of a sudden he just transforms and destroys stuff, it's like, yeah, that's awful, and we can't have that. You know what I mean? I don't know. All I'm trying to say is that this movie tested the waters, and it just kind of felt like, and we can't do this over and over and over again. Realistically, we just can't. We have to give it some new life, some new juice. You know what I mean? We have to give it a little extra oomph to it, and that oomph is making him a part of a team, making him a part of something more. You know what I'm saying? Making him using the thing that he hates to our advantage because of that. You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting to see. And then later on, it just becomes about like, how can we see the Hulk? Essentially, how do we see the Hulk growing or evolving or changing? You know what I'm saying? It's more about like, how do we see the Hulk as the Hulk and not as Bruce Banner? You know what I'm saying? How do we not see it as Bruce Banner transforms into this thing and it's just a monster? And how do we make it like the Hulk as its own character, its own thing? You know what I mean? And that's kind of something that has been difficult, you know, moving forward. But this movie by itself, I really got to say, it's there or it's not there. I'm not really all that torn about it. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh yeah, that was a terrible movie. Or I'm not one of those people who's like, it shouldn't be a part of it. And I'm like, it should, but it shouldn't. It can, but it, also can't be a part of it because it's so different now, So how do you really say that like that version of the character shouldn't be a part of the story as a whole when it is connected, but then they change the main actor, they change the look of the character, they change nothing about that movie really comes back later on, other than maybe Thunderbolt Ross. It all kind of goes all over the place, you know what I mean? So I make the case that it's like, it's in this neutral zone of like, it can be a part of it, it could be excluded from it. I don't care. I just feel like it's one of those, let's try it and see what happens. And it didn't all work out. So yeah, that's my feeling on the Incredible Hulk. Would I I definitely don't think I need to watch it again. But if like, if it just so happened to be on, there are a couple scenes that I like, you know what I mean? I like the scene at I think it was at the college or whatever, where they like, the Hulk breaks out of that glass. That was a cool scene. Obviously the fight with Abomination, that's a cool scene. There's like a scene where he's like kind of transforming, and then the girlfriend like jumps on top of him and is like, calm down, calm down, look at me, look at me. She's being like one of those girls. She's like, look at me, you're okay, you're okay, you know what I mean? And then he just like doesn't transform. I thought that was a good scene. Oh my gosh, I forgot to mention the Stan Lee cameo. Stan Lee cameo. I should probably do like a special section for the Stan Lee cameo, but Stan Lee drinks a soda with like Bruce Banner's blood and instantly dies. And then he comes back for the next movie. I think that's really funny. And in Iron Man, he was with all of those, he was like in the paparazzi. He was getting like his picture taken, and I think Iron Man, I think Tony came up to him and was like, "You're looking good, Hef." I think he thought it was Hugh Hefner, but it was Stan Lee. I thought it was a great moment. So yeah, I'll probably start doing the Stan Lee cameos. But yeah, the Incredible Hulk, love it or hate it, it's a comic book movie. You know what I'm saying? So I really don't think about it too much. I think it's just like, it's a part of it. It's not a part of it. It is or it isn't. It just kind of like neutral. It's this neutral spot. So, yeah, I think it's okay. So, anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thank you.